Well, I swear campaign season just ended, and we just watched Schumer take back the Senate, and now we're already being asked who is the pro-gun candidate as we approach the elections next go-around. We have two primary contenders, the way it seems already, front runners. Obviously President Trump, obviously Ron DeSantis. Other names are being drummed around, and there's just a lot of questions in the gun rights community right now. Who's going to be the guy? Who's going to fight for gun rights? Yeah, it's a tough question.
Yeah, you've got Nikki Haley running. You've got there's rumors about Mike Pence, but you know, when it comes to the fight here in D.C., you know, we've stopped pretty much all but one, maybe two,
all but one big one
of the of Biden's legislative attacks. But the damage that he has done through executive orders on bump stocks, well, I guess that goes back a little bit further than Biden, but bump stocks, ATF rule change, rule promulgation, we're seeing that right now with the pistol brace ruling, 80% lowers. Funding the CDC's war on gun owners, that's been a huge thing.
Well, and the import bans on ammo, too.
Yeah, exactly. There has been a ton of damage that's been done to the Second Amendment.
Yeah, I think it's easy for folks to kind of think that as long as we stop the assault weapons ban, as long as we stop universal background checks, we've saved our gun rights. But I guess it's kind of, for a lot of guys, as you said, there's a lot of little things that have been done that are very detrimental to our gun rights. And so the next Republican president can't simply veto gun control coming to his desk or her desk from Congress. We need somebody who will stand up and help us, you know, fight back. There's a variety of analogies. You could use a surgeon. You have to have a surgeon to go into the cancerous body that Joe Biden has created and cut out all of the gun control, executive orders, the bureaucratic processes, the funding bills. You can use that analogy. You can also talk about this from a dam perspective. You know, behind this dam of freedom is tyranny. And over the last 18 months, now to 2 years, we've stopped, as you said, most of the big hits. The wall is still standing.
The barge of gun control has been coming towards the dam, and that's been stopped a little bit, but
that wall is getting weaker. And I think that's what has me frustrated in the gun rights space is the wall's up, but each little thing Biden does is one more hole in the dam. Each order, each funding bill, each ATF rule change is one more hole in the dam. And so from
a brick falling down.
Exactly. And so the gun rights community we're plugging these holes, right? We're covering these little spots as best we can. And the next Republican president needs to not just stop signing gun control. He needs to grab a trowel and help us, you know, caulk up the holes. He needs to help us rebuild the wall
and get on a turret on top of that dam and start like taking some shots at that barge coming back. They need to defund, or I don't know, overturn that funding that Congress passed for red flag laws. They need to reclassify pistol braces and bump stocks and all these different things. They certainly need to defund the CDC's gun violence research that's happening, because we are seeing that now in state legislatures all across America. In fact, I was in the Pennsylvania Capitol just yesterday, and they are quoting these CDC numbers now and as justification to pass universal gun registration, red flags gun confiscation. These things need to not just be left alone. You know, it's not just enough for a Republican president to be, oh, I'm pro-gun, and so there's no more threat for gun control. No, those things need to be fixed. There's been major damage done to the dam of the Second Amendment that needs to be fixed, and they need to do it.
And we haven't had a president actually do this ever in our lifetime. We've had, you know, the Clinton's AW ban expired as a sunset clause. That was just kind of allowed to lapse. But we have not had a president in our lifetime who went back into the White House and said, I'm going to undo all this. And we keep taking these hits, and there's small hits here, big hits there. Last year's red flag funding bill, as you mentioned, that was a brick out of the dam. Oh, yeah. That was not a hole. That was a brick.
That's one of those instances where you see the water is starting to shoot out the other side of the dam, and you're getting very concerned that the whole thing is going to go.
Yeah, so we need that next president to come back and, to use my analogy, grab the trowel and help us, you know, rebuild the dam and patch the holes and solidify, you know, the last defense against tyranny.
And essentially do what a lot of these Republican governors have been doing in states across America. The state legislatures, I shouldn't say the governors actually, it's been starting the work for gun rights has been being done by state legislatures all across America.
Yeah,
nothing to do with Congress, nothing to do with the presidency. So you're absolutely right.
So the big question, obviously, then is, well, it's a GOP primary. Everybody's pro-gun. Everybody's pro-gun. And we see this every day in state capitals, and we're seeing it, of course, in the last presidential cycle. On the GOP side, everybody is pro-gun. And this kind of gets to the heart and soul of the podcast is you have these two front runners. We've got Governor DeSantis. You've got President Trump, or President Trump, Governor DeSantis, depends on how you want to talk about it. Who is going to be the guy who is actually going to do what we talked about? Who's going to go back in that White House and help us undo all the damage? And I'm just going to kind of put my thoughts out when it comes to President Trump.
Yeah. Because
he's, of course, he's certainly a front runner, maybe the front runner right now. It was tough to watch that video from President Trump in the White House. That video is infamous. Every gun owner has seen it 100 times.
Yeah.
Grab the guns first, due process later. Grab the guns first, due process later. In the Rose Garden, big old press conference urging Congress to pass red flag gun seizures.
The same place that we saw Joe Biden stand with Merrick Garland to launch essentially the same kind of an attack.
So it's not something that we can just gloss over. And in the context of the next president who will help us rebuild the wall, so to speak, President Trump needs to tell gun owners, does he stand by those comments?
Right.
Because the biggest gun control bill Biden did pass was the funding bill for red flag gun seizures. Well, not a red flag law for the country, but it funded red flags all across the states. And so President Trump, does he still stand by these comments?
Well, and I think the damage was far more deep than just the surface level opposition that gun owners would normally face to something like that. Because just like the left, the Democrats have used Scalia's words about the Second Amendment against us when we're trying to push pro-gun bills or whatever. We have seen time and time again where they are using President Trump's words about red flags, gun confiscation laws against us as justification why they should do it in these states. And that is tremendously damaging to our Second Amendment rights when we're trying to do this stuff at the state level. But now we're right back to who's going to fight for us in the White House.
Right. So I think President Trump has two questions to answer. Number one, do you stand by those comments? And then number two, if you do not stand by those comments, will you promise gun owners that you will in fact go the opposite direction and use your power as the next president to undo the red flag bill from last year? He can't just say, I don't back red flags anymore. He needs to tell us, will you help us undo the damage?
Yeah. It's so much damage has been done, like you said, with that dam analogy. We cannot afford another 4-year Republican presidency where nothing gets done on the Second Amendment. Quite literally during those 4 years of Trump's first presidency, the first 2 years were a total Republican Congress and White House, and nothing got done. Worse. Well, we saw the bump stock ban, and that kind of was the sounding shot off to the races when the Democrat left, and they haven't stopped since.
Well, it made it impossible for Republicans in Congress when Joe Biden then took up the same executive order pen and began to reclassify 80% lowers, reclassify pistol braces. When the gun community stood up and said, you can't do that. You're bypassing Congress. You're using tyrannical actions to make millions of gun owners criminals. All the left did is said, well, President Trump did that just a year and a half ago when it comes to bump stocks. So shut your mouth.
Yeah. Yep. It has to be aggressively gone back on and pursued back in the other direction.
Well, those are the questions for President Trump, and we hope to ask him those questions and give him a candidate survey and let him put his views in writing, and we'll discuss that later on. But the other front runner, of course, is Governor DeSantis, and everyone loves Governor DeSantis, no question about it. But for Floridians, they know that what was once called the gunshine state back in the 90s with stand your ground law, one of the first shall issue states. When we were in college, it was the gunshine state.
Yeah,
it was the gold standard for the Second Amendment. But Florida's lost that shine. And for a lot of gun owners in Florida, they know this, of course, firsthand. But for those who are not there, they might not know that Florida doesn't have good gun laws.
No.
Quite the contrary.
And I think it's important for people to remember, if you're watching this video later on, that we are exclusively focused here on the issue of the Second Amendment and gun rights. I think the entirety of America wish that they lived down in Florida during the lockdowns. I think when we consider Florida and Governor DeSantis when it comes to the whole Disney versus transgender mutilation and stuff like that, I think conservative America was just sitting there like, oh my goodness, I wish this guy was my governor.
True.
But we are talking specifically about gun laws here and the fight that needs to, the all-out war that needs to be waged back on the offense if they get in. And you're right, Florida does not have the best gun laws anymore. States have eclipsed them long ago. Missouri, for goodness sake,
many
Missouri,
states.
So.
But you are right, though. It's not. This is a focus on guns, and the only way we can vet candidates, especially if they're prior or current office holders, is look at their record. What have they done in office? That's because everybody's pro-gun in a primary. Everybody's pro-gun in a GOP primary. So what we're doing here is saying, well, we know what President Trump has said and done. There's a lot to be desired. And when it comes to Governor DeSantis, there's some things there too, because in 2018, before he was the governor, this is not a bill he signed. I want to be very clear on that. After the Parkland shooting, Florida passed a massive gun control package, not the least of which was it raised the age on when people can buy certain types of firearms. We saw waiting periods become effective in the state. But the big one, though, was red flag gun seizures. And, prior to that, I believe we only had Indiana was the only other red state that had passed red flag laws, and that was way back in the early 2000s. But as you mentioned, with President Trump's comments on red flags being used against us, we have experienced this in droves, in spades, in the last 5-6 years now at the state level. Democrat lawmakers saying Florida has red. I heard it 2 days ago in committee in Missouri, as a matter of fact. Florida has red flag laws. Why can't we have red flag laws here? So there's a lot of damage that has been done in Florida as well. And I guess asking kind of the same questions we asked of President Trump, to Governor DeSantis, we would like to have seen these things addressed.
Well, I think of the phrase "past results are indicative of future performance." I mean, it kind of comes to bear here. It's also important to remember that we're not in year 2 or year 1 of Governor DeSantis's administration. We just started the 5th year of his administration, and like you said, red flags have been on the books in that state now since 2018 after the Parkland shooting. And it's also, when you kind of step back and look at the broader picture of what's happened in gun rights in America since 2018, you have had an explosion of constitutional carry states all across America. Pretty much any state that had a Republican legislature and a Republican governor stepped right up to the plate and whaled that one out of the park. And we're talking, and I guess this is where we get down to the minutia of what's going on in Florida right now. But when it comes to passing constitutional carry, the vast majority of them kicked the big, robust versions of constitutional carry out, where they not only repealed the mandate to have a license, but they expanded it so that you could carry whatever concealed weapon that you wanted to. You can carry openly or concealed. They didn't make those distinctions. A lot of states made it. I think the vast majority of constitutional carry states made it so that non-residents could carry open, constitutionally in their states. But Florida, I think, is the last Republican majority, a trifecta state where the Republicans control the state Senate, the state House, and the governor's mansion. And they've not passed constitutional carry.
And there's a lot of people who are kind of talking about that because it's certainly in the process right now in Tallahassee, and it's probably going to become law later on this year. But as you mentioned, the headlines are easy, constitutional carry passed in Florida. But again, what does it look like? And because the details tell you how much resolve the lawmakers and the governor who were fighting for it brought to the table.
Right.
And as you said, I mean, just in the last couple of years, you've got Kim Reynolds in Iowa, you've got Governor Holcomb, no conservative, in Indiana, you've got Mike DeWine.
Well, I hate to make a comparison there because because Mike DeWine used to be rated F by the NRA for what he did with Dianne Feinstein.
And it's hard to get an F from those guys.
I know it is. It's very hard. But now you've got a situation where Mike DeWine has signed stand your ground law and constitutional carry, and he very well will likely this year yet sign the Second Amendment Preservation Act into law. This guy is outperforming Ron DeSantis, and that is a weird world that we're living in here. But exactly. I want to talk about that constitutional carry bill down in Florida right now, because this bill sponsors, I think it's House Representative Chuck Brannon is his name. They're calling it constitutional carry, but House Bill 543, which is the one that just passed in the House and will very likely pass all the way through and get signed by Governor DeSantis, it's not actually constitutional carry. It's actually permitless carry.
Right.
And Florida is one of only 3 states in America, even after this bill passes,
right.
Open carry will still be outlawed in that state, and that makes it one of only 3 states in America that outlaw open carry. That's Florida, that's New York, and Illinois.
So 2 hard blue states, and then
2 of the worst states, and then Florida. But they'll have permitless carry. You can concealed carry. You just can't carry openly, or you're going to get hooked up.
And that's the whole point here: is all these details give us at least some perspective on how would this person, in this case Governor DeSantis, or in the case of President Trump, how would they fight for us going forward? All we can do is look at their previous fights. And so it's easy to get the headline on constitutional carry, but the devil's in the details. And regardless of what version of that law is signed by the governor this year, the big question remains: why hasn't there been a push to repeal red flag gun seizures? Why hasn't there been press conferences to repeal? I mean, everyone watches the governor's press conference. They're great. I watch them. They're fantastic.
Yeah, especially after the hurricane. You better not come down here and start looting, because we're a Second Amendment state.
I mean, he trolls the left better than almost anybody else in the debate today. So it's not like he's not able to do a press conference on this. And some will say, well, he can't sponsor the bill. Of course, but
he can do what he did with the Disney bill and call up the Speaker Renner and Kathleen Passidomo, who is the Senate president, and say, I want real constitutional carry, or these other bills are going to have a hard time getting past my veto pen.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the way he did it on Disney. That's the way, whatever Republican is our next president, that's how they have to act at repealing all this nasty gun control and damage that's been done to the Second Amendment.
And so I guess, to put a fine point to it, we asked President Trump, do you stand by those previous comments? When it comes to Governor DeSantis, will you use your current position as governor to call for a repeal of red flag gun seizures, again, to show the gun rights community that you will pick up that trowel, as we said, or grab that surgeon's scalpel and cut out the cancer of gun control.
Get on that Browning.
Yeah, you get the better analogy.
Get on the butterflies.
Fine, you get the better analogy. But will you use this position you have now to help us, fight in Florida, to show us that you're going to fight for us in D.C.? It's a big question.
Yeah, which is why I think we have to give them candidate surveys. We have to get them to go on record in writing so they can show every American gun owner all across the country, I'm not just going to be the pro-gun guy that says that I'm not going to do gun control under this administration. I'm going to be the fighter that you need. I'm going to be the warrior that you need. We saw President Trump, I mean, those first couple of years, I mean, it warmed your heart to watch him get into office and instantly start like taking a sledgehammer to the radical left on so many areas. We need that person to be doing the same thing on gun rights if we get a Republican in there again. I
think it's key, as you've mentioned, the goal here is, we're not dunking on either Governor DeSantis or President Trump. It's just that we're in desperate times. As I mentioned when we began this podcast, we've lost ground.
Yeah,
we've lost a lot of ground. The cultural conditioning taking place right now against gun owners in our schools, all the way up to Congress, everywhere in between, is going to produce terrible results. The CDC programs are funding that. The executive orders that are bypassing Congress is what it's the lack of that. It's having Congress to make law is what keeps us from being a banana country, from being a third world dictatorship. And we are so close now to that point where the president can simply grab his pen and declare, well, for example, 40 million people who own pistol braces are going to be potentially facing felonies when this law takes effect.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of damage done. And so the issue is not to to dunk either of these two candidates. It's that we have to undo that damage, not just stop more damage from occurring.
Yep. The DOJ, the ATF, it's all under the executive branch of government. On day one, the Republican president, whoever that is, Trump, DeSantis, somebody else, I mean, we've seen weird things
Perish
happen.
the thought.
Perish the thought. They're going to have to haul the ATF director in there and say, number one, you, Dettelbach, are fired, and then here's your replacement. But then anybody else, they need to be told, you are going to rewrite that pistol brace ruling. Yes. You're going to rewrite that bump stock ruling. If you're not, you're fired. We'll get rid of all of you unless you do that. And those are the drastic steps that need to be taken going forward here.
And the thing is that it might seem drastic to some, but this is everyday business for the radical left.
Yes.
I mean, they hit the ground running on day one, long before day one. They had all these plans on paper. They had all of them ready to go. And so on day one, they grab, demented tyrant Biden. They hobble him into a desk somewhere. And they pull away his ice cream cone.
They give him a stack of paper.
Yeah, they say, sign this, sign this, sign this. And that's all it took.
Yep.
So the next president needs to do the exact same thing.
Yes.
Sign this, sign this, sign this. And if we don't have that, we're going to have a really difficult time rebuilding the damage that we've incurred over the last couple of years.
And so we're conservatives, and we believe that competition is a good thing. And so I'd say that the one, like a bright spot here for gun owners looking forward is that this is a Republican primary.
Yeah.
These two are going to be going head to head. Neither one of them are going to be short on name ID or media availability and stuff like that. What we're going to do then is we're going to leverage all of these state-level gun rights organizations. These people all need to go through all these Republican primary states. It doesn't matter if we're talking about Minnesota, which historically goes to the Democrats during the general election. In the primary here is when Republican gun owners, when conservative gun owners across the country need to absolutely winnow the field. And that's where the power of all these different gun rights organizations in all these different important states across America and this candidate survey program are going to play a huge, huge role in determining who the next president is going to be.
So that's our whole plan. Yes. Yeah, that is the plan, is to get the surveys to these candidates, and all, not just to these two, to all the candidates, and give them a chance to go on the record. And it doesn't mean that they can't break their word down the road, but if a candidate won't tell us where they stand when they need our support, we have no reason to trust how they're going to act after they have won the election. And so I think it's going to be a great survey. I mean, the issues here are so black and white. We don't have to have 47 questions and double negatives.
No,
it's pretty straightforward.
Yes.
We're facing tyranny. Will you help us undo the damage? And we're going to ask some detailed questions, but it's pretty simple. And it gives gun owners across America a chance to say, oh, so that's how I can help vet these candidates. And so if you're a gun owner in Iowa, for example, where they have, you can't go to a pizza ranch in Iowa for the next 15, 18 months, whatever it is, without bumping into a candidate. That's how it is. If you're a gun owner in Ohio, even, that's more of the general election dynamic, perhaps, but not necessarily.
It's all primary states. Every single one of them. They need to be campaigning.
Yeah, and so when you're at the events and you're seeing Governor DeSantis, you're seeing President Trump, we're going to give gun owners the chance to print off the survey, and we will empower gun owners to themselves go before these candidates when they're at these very intimate gatherings in many cases and say, will you sign this? Will you help us?
In the past, I don't know if we want to tell everybody this, but in the past, when we've had federal candidates who didn't want to fill out their candidate survey,
the bounty,
we've released bounties before, so it might have. We don't think it'll be get to this point, but if we have to, we will give away a monster. Totally tricked out AR, and say we will give that to whoever gets these candidates to fill it out on camera,
on video.
Absolutely. So that's we're looking forward to that. But I mean, if you're part of the campaign staff watching this right now, we highly recommend. Gun owners are mobilized. They're angry. They're righteously angry. And they need these results, and more than ever, gun owners especially are becoming single-issue voters So if your campaign staff or you're a candidate watching this right now, better sign that survey.
And the generational shift is well underway in the gun rights community as well.
Yeah.
You know, there was a time when you could just simply say I'm pro-gun and you'd have everybody's support. There was a time when a double-barreled side-by-side gold inlaid Beretta shotgun was considered like this is what the gun community is all about. That's not the case.
No.
This generation wants binary triggers. They want bump stocks. They want pistol braces. They want all the good stuff, and they want to see candidates at the national level all the way down to the local level in their state capitals who will say, I'm going to stand in that gap.
Yeah.
I am going to pick up the trowel and help you defend our freedoms because we all know what lies beyond that wall if the dam breaks.
Yep.
So it's going to be a great way for our members, for all kinds of gun owners to say, this is what I want and I want you to sign it.
Yeah.
And if they won't sign it, it tells them something.
Yep. I think it's the path forward here is very clear, and like you said, the generational gap is upon us. People want those things now that you just detailed, those bump stocks, these pistol braces, and forced reset triggers now, because the reason why our founding fathers codified these rights in these documents is more apparent now than it has ever been before.
Yes.
It's very clear now that we need our AR-15s as the final check and balance on tyrannical government.
Yep.
That's what the founders enshrined these things in these documents for. It wasn't about deer hunting.
Nope.
And we need these rights, and we need them protected now. So
Let's do it.
Yep.